I don't mean to alarm you guys on nothing, but I think it might be silly mode. Yeah, I'm thinking silly mode. Waiter, ding ding, a glass of silly mode, if you will. It's silly mode, isn't it? And welcome back to Devlog in the last part, and in this part I'll be going over the black hole and, spoilers, white hole mechanics for Pep-Pellington. The black hole mechanic, very simple. There's a black hole that pulls you towards it. It has momentum relative to its position, to the player's position, but has to be in a curve, so you could maybe use this to manipulate your trajectory, for example running alongside the bottom of it and then jumping and then having it arc you upwards with the trajectory of the black hole, and if you touch the center of it, you die. That's the whole mechanic. The black hole will add force to the player relative to its direction to the player and also the player's distance to the black hole. Devlog over, bye! The way the black hole actually works is very simple, but there is one minor nuance to its systems, this being that I cannot have the force that is added to the player added instantly when going onto the black hole. For example, if we are running along the bottom of the black hole, we'll immediately pull diagonally towards wherever the center of the black hole is, and I want the force of the black hole to be adjusted gradually as the player is in the presence of the black hole, so you can do fun things like arc your trajectory around the black hole. Very obviously, this is not going to work with the regular linear sort of application of force because it's just going to be going towards the center of the black hole and nothing else. So what I do is I add a delay to this, which is that the force applied to the player is going to adjust over time to whatever it should be. So if we're directly under the black hole, it's going to have a force going upwards towards the center of the black hole. As we move right along the black hole, we're going to be more of a diagonally force added to the player, but this is going to adjust over time, so we're still going to get this initial upward boost that was applied to the player with the initial positioning of where the player was stood in front of the black hole. This is very simple. I have a radius around the black hole of the black hole where it will affect the player. If the player enters this radius and the player was not already in this radius, we're going to start adjusting our velocity of our black hole to whatever this value is and applying it to the player's movement values. Luckily I already wrote a script for this maybe a year ago because I added wind physics, and the black holes are pretty much just wind physics manipulated. This value that is being built up is going to be applied to the player using the script I already have, which is basically just adding or subtracting to their gravity and adding and subtracting to their momentum. It's not super complicated. And then also, if the player exits this radius, we're just going to reset this velocity amount, so when the player re-enters the velocity radius of the black hole, it's just going to go back to normal and we can have force applied once again to our character. This is manipulated with a value on the black hole called control, so I can have different black holes have different control as to how quickly they will start applying force to the character. For example, maybe I want a black hole that is the opposite of a black hole. Maybe I want a white hole that is going to push the player away from the black hole. I also added white holes to add complexity to the level design. I also enjoy making a mechanic and then making the opposite of the mechanic, the same mechanic in the level, because I find that interesting. Visually, it's obviously going to do the complete opposite because it has a pulsing particle effect that goes in the opposite direction of the black hole. It's the opposite color, and here's the important part, it pushes you away from it. So you could probably tell what it does. You may think I wrote unique coding for the white hole. I did not. I just turned the force value that it would add to the player from a 12 to a -12 and reduced its control amount so it acts slightly differently from the black hole. The white hole pushes the player away from it. These are really fun for mechanics where the player may have to be boosted upwards or away from a white hole and has to maintain their velocity or dash in a certain direction towards a white hole to be pushed away from it. Look, you're watching the video, you can see the mechanics where I use a white hole. The white hole adds a funny amount of force to the player. These are the most, I feel, aside from the rope physics in the previous levels where physics and movement and momentum has really come into play in Pep-Pel. Obviously momentum is kind of the whole point of the game, but the black and white holes actually adding this weird amount of force to the player that you have to manipulate with and control in the game is pretty interesting and satisfying to control. And also, here's the key point, also it's very funny to have Pep-Pel be flung around a black hole into a big pile of spikes. Next, I need to have additional logic for if the player is on the ground when interacting with a black or white hole. This is very obvious. The player can run on walls and be upside down in certain instances. Realistically, there's not a whole lot of instances where the player is actually going to be influenced a whole amount by the black hole when on the ground. They're mostly a thing you have to jump into, or a thing that's going to be pulling you horizontally or vertically on a flat surface. There's not a whole lot of instances where you're going to be running up a wall, down a wall, or be upside down on the wall when under the influence of a black and white hole, but I wrote the logic for this just in case. Basically, if you are running up or down a wall, the gravity is not going to be affected on the x-axis. The gravity of the black hole is going to be affecting you on the y-axis, basically pulling you up the wall or down the wall, or away from the wall if it is to the horizontal positioning of the player. But basically, I just need to flip the x and the y around for the black hole's force, because momentum is not going left or right, momentum is now going up or down because the player is running on a wall. Next is the player upside down on a roof. If this is happening, again a very simple fix, I just flip the x and the y around. Basically, if you're upside down and running towards the right, you're actually going to be moving left in world space. So, your momentum is need to be added the opposite when upside down on a roof. This is all very unique to Pep-Pel because I coded this game in a convoluted way. Next, let's talk about why I even added a black hole in the first place. It's the game design portion of the devlog, where I talk about my design process. Basically, I was working on the Meteor Madness level, the final level of Pep-Pellington, and I realized that the shadow clones, real fun, portals, real fun. But you know what I was missing? A convoluted third mechanic for the level, because I really enjoy Pep-Pel having a bunch of multiple mechanics in a level. Obviously, every single level has had a lot of different mechanics so far, aside from the first level, which has none, and the second level, which only has 2. Every other level has... Well, actually, the water level doesn't really have a whole lot. Every other level has a ton of mechanics, at least 3 in the level. It's not really a mandatory thing for Pep-Pel, but I just feel like it is sort of the design of the game to have a lot of mechanics in one level. I think it's very fun for game design. I also think with levels being as large as they are, I have to keep really introducing things as the level progresses. And black holes and white holes really fit with the aesthetic of the level. You're in the space, you're in a big meteor. Black holes be in space. I also needed a mechanic that would have some level of hazard around it. The portals, aside from some puzzle and momentum sections, don't have a whole lot of hazardous elements around the portals, but black and white holes can very obviously be served more as an aggressive hazard in a level where it is a mechanic. The black hole can be pulling you towards itself, which is going to harm the player when touching it. It could be pulling you in the momentum direction, away from where you should be going, and pulling you into spikes. The white hole could be pushing you away from your actual path and pushing you into spikes. They're both pretty much exclusively hazards. There's very few instances where a white and a black hole is actually helping the player in the level, unless it's a specific part where they have to use the momentum of the black and white holes to progress through the level, but even then, that's more of a hazardous thing that they have to do, where it is going to push them in a specific direction. So, basically I needed a mechanic in the Meteor Madness level that is more of a imminent hazard that the player has to deal with, and also is fun. I think the mechanic for the black and white holes is a lot of fun. Despite the level originally going to be the portal level, I, turns out, just enjoy the mechanic where you play with black and white holes significantly more. I just think it's a very fun little gameplay mechanic to have. Finally, we have the visual design of the black and white holes. A hole that is black, has a little bit of a spirally spiral around it, and then a white line is drawn around the hole, and then I have stars, and they get pulled into the hole. And that's the design. The black and white holes has been the easiest visual design to make so far. Basically, I just ripped a bunch of the particle systems that I was using for the portals, and I colored them to look like black and white holes, and I made the visual for the black and white holes. They're very, very simple. They're just a color. I mean, a black hole, pretty simple to do. Just have a black hole with a white ring around it and then have stuff pulled into it. white hole. Pretty simple to do. Have a white hole with a black ring around it and stuff pulled out of it. That's all you need for the visuals. I kind of like space visuals that look like this, very minimalist, using a lot of black and white, intense coloring. I think it fits with the actual level design very well, because they're an intense, non-coloured section to a level that is otherwise one of the more colourful levels in Pep-Pel. And also, I like the swirling particle effect. And that is it for Devlog, the black and white hole. Again, same with the portals. Very, very simple mechanic to actually code and add into Pep-Pel, which is probably why it's a little janky. But overall in level testing, I have found the portal mechanics and the mechanic that I meant to say, the black hole and white hole mechanics, pretty reliable and fun in testing. I was originally a bit worried because they are very physics-based that I wouldn't be able to get as many specific aspects of level design, for example, where you have to maneuver and sling yourself through the black hole in a very specific way to get through one section of level. But I have found through testing and working with the black holes, it's pretty easy to consistently get yourself flung by them. Here's a trick. Get real close to the black hole, and when you're being pulled up, activate your double jump. This is going to dampen your descent vertically, and you're going to be launched really far. That one's for free. Speedrunners, do what you will with that one. There's actually a lot of sections of the level where I have figured out that if you maneuver yourself very specifically with the black hole, you can actually sling yourself and avoid a bunch of the level, or gain a bunch of momentum and just dodge a bunch of the level, or avoid things that you would have otherwise had to platform around, and I think that's very fun. I like having that as an option in level designs. The next devlog will be about the Meteor Madness level as a whole, just the visual design and level design of the Meteor Madness level, which is, as always, one of my favorites. I like this level a lot. Visually, mwah. Design, mwah. Everything else about it, mwah. Funny level, and I'll be talking about that next devlog.